Good morning, everyone. Since our speaker has joined, we'll finally start the meeting. And without further ado, I invite you all to the volume 10 of the Crime, Justice, and Society Dialogue, organized by Indian Society of Criminology. And I thank each one of you from across institutions and regions for taking the time to join us today. A brief introduction about the society and the lecture series for all new participants. The Indian Society of Criminology was established in 1970 at the Department of Criminology, University of Madras, with the objective to advance study and application of criminology and allied sciences. Over the decades, the ISC has grown into a national professional body with over 1,000 members institutions. Started as a bi-weekly academic platform, this talent series brings together scholars from across the world with an aim to reconnect students and early career scholars with theory and comparative perspectives while remaining attentive to contemporary realities. Particularly, this directs at students, scholars, and early career academics, paving way for sustained international scholarship beyond conferences and textbooks. I would now like to place on record my sincere gratitude to the leadership of the Indian Society for Criminology for their constant encouragement and support for this initiative, particularly Dr. N.K. Chakrabarti, President, ISC, Dr. Madhav Somasundaram, Chairperson, ISC, Dr. M.D. Alan Silvakumar, Secretary, ISC, and all other office bearers of the Society whose guidance and trust have made this lecture series possible. I once again welcome all of you to this lecture and sincerely thank our speaker, Dr. Navtika Singh Nautiyal, for agreeing to be part of this journey. Dr. Navtika Singh Nautiyal is an assistant professor at the School of Law, Forensic Justice and Policy Studies, National Forensic Science University, Delhi campus, India. She completed her postdoctoral research in human rights and artificial intelligence at MICHR, Italy, and holds a PhD in law from Uttaranchal University and an LLM in criminal law and human rights from the Indian Law Institute, New Delhi. With over 14 years of experience in teaching, research, and academic leadership, her work focuses on the intersection of law, artificial intelligence, human rights, criminal justice, constitutional law, and legal education. Dr. Nautiyal has edited five scholarly books, published more than 40 research articles, book chapters, and edited works, and presented over 90 research papers at prestigious national and international conferences. Her academic contributions have been recognized through multiple awards for excellence in training and research, and she remains actively engaged in academic research and international collaboration. With that, I once again thank you all for joining us today. I also kindly request our participants to mark the attendance by filling out the Google form shared in the chat box to facilitate the issue of certificates. I now invite Dr. Navtika Singh Nautia to take the session forward. Over to you, Dr. Navtika.
Thank you so much, Yazuli, for the introduction. And I'm really sorry to everybody because I am. Just give me a minute. Thank you, sir. So, everybody, I am really sorry. I was traveling. I just settled down in between to take this lecture. So, yes, the breathing was necessary. So, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I have already wasted your 40 minutes. I'm sure you all would be waiting for me. I have no words, but I'll quickly start my presentation so that there will be no, ados about it. So, when I'm talking about this particular topic, I wish to talk to you all about the understanding that how you understand this particular topic. I don't know how many people have this particular understanding that how deepfake work or how cyber crimes work. We all heard that okay, there are cyber stalking, there are different different challenges. Usually, I don't have right to present my presentation. I can only share my screen. I'm just trying one more time. Okay, I can present now. Okay, sure. So, when this topic comes, everybody try to become an expert that, okay, this can be cyber stalking or this can be deep fake. These are different technological facilitated crime. But wish to tell you all that this is not that, what we are talking about. When this particular challenge comes to women, I remember I was talking to Department of Justice, Ministry of Law and Justice, way back in 2022, when we were talking about this particular crime, that okay, what are the cyber crimes related to women. Friends, you won't believe, more than 50 crimes are there which are being technological facilitated crime. And that particular time to this particular time, we have 4 years difference. So let me take you to this particular ecosystem, that how we are talking about, why we are talking about. So first of all, we shall not look at women, a person who can only who can be a homemaker, who is a working woman. Now women can be both, women can be either, or there is no requirement for either also. So the opening question to you all is, can a crime exist when the offender never physically touches the victim? Whenever I'm a learner of criminology per se. So for me, when I am defining act means series of act, and whenever there are any sexual, physical, psychological harm comes, the definition of harm, we talk about bodily touch, we talk about you know for example, the person has looked at other person wrongly. uh, but imagine, you never been touched, looked, discussed, but you are vulnerable, you are a victim. How? Because technology can amplify, accelerate, and conceal also violence. Now, when I looked into the definition of violence, I have physical, emotional, psychological violence. But what about the virtual violence? What about the virtual sexual assault? I remember a paper which I have presented in RGUNL about virtual assault and virtual, assault, then virtual rape. When an avatar is, committing assault on another avatar, there is no requirement even of that particular person to be there, but that is there. So that is the conversation which I want to have it to you all. I'm sure you all are using smartphones, everybody. We are meeting here on Google Meet is also a technology which we are using. We are using social media, we are using different applications, we are using artificial intelligence. Now I have seen a new culture has come of the where you are uploading your picture and you are asking the AI to beautify this, or you are asking the AI to merge the picture. We all are using cloud services, we are also using different spywares to have the commission, facilitation, amplification of violence against women. Now the situation is twofold. Technology may not be the cause of the violence, but technology is the instrument, is the platform through which violence is being committed. Now, to answer this situation, we have to understand that there is a relationship between private photographs obtained, threat of publication, anonymous account, fake uploads, sharing, AI generated editions, mass circulation, reputational and psychological harm. So now let's hypothetically assume that there are two people, one boy and a girl, they are in love. Everything was right, fair, good when they were in relationship. But the moment our situation, a problem has come, they're breaking apart. then digital crime is a new problem. Now when you shared your pictures, when you clicked your pictures, when you there was consent to take that picture. But when they've been shared, circulated, morphed, edited, created, there was no consent. So now it's a continuous crime. When it has been done, when it has been acquired, there was consent. When it has been used, misused, there is no consent, or that real time consent is missing. So how to make that balance, we all have to discuss that. So these are the major crimes. When we are talking about women, I will be taking you all to these crimes little one by one. These are some of them you may have heard, some of them you may know, some of them you may have awareness. Cyber stalking, everybody is aware, but there is always a definition misunderstanding with respect to cyber stalking. Then cyber harassment, we all are aware. Post covid, the situation has been grossed more. Doxing is new form. Online impersonation is where the people are nowadays talking about the personality, right? Impersonation becomes a situation. Identity theft is related to it. Image based sexual abuse is another situation which are talking about. Sextortion, the example which I just gave it to you, sextortion is new form of crime which has come. Then cyberbullying is another situation. With respect to deep fake use, women are largely being victimized. Digital domestic abuse is a new form which has come. And then lastly is AI enabled exploitation. These are the major branches which I am going to talk to you all about it. So the first one is cyber stalking. What is cyber stalking? For instance, a woman rejects an online acquaintance, and the person has sent dozens of messages, creates different accounts after being blocked multiple times, contact different friends, send different photographs showing locations near her workplace. She is being cyber stalked. Now, one day, one person asked me, if I'm following somebody on Instagram and I am checking his or her account every day, is it cyber stalking? I want to ask you all, is it cyber stalking? Or cyber stalking is online surveillance to intimidate and to have a physical world damage. It could be and or physical world damage. So we have to understand, when we were talking about stalking has the more gravity than of following. Following may not have an apprehension of or intimidation, apprehension of danger or intimidation, but stalking would have an online surveillance to intimidate somebody or to have a physical world danger. That is the understanding of cyber stalking. So let's clear that concept in mind. The next one is doxing. Doxing is deliberately publishing the personal information. For example, nowadays I've seen this culture that people are taking a screenshot of personal chat and putting up on LinkedIn, Instagram, WhatsApp status. If now how this particular thing will become a crime, let's understand. Digital disclosure can create offline safety risk. Okay, mind the two terminology. Digital disclosure can create offline safety risk. Let's take this example. A woman criticizes somebody online. Her home address, phone number, workplace, and family details are published with a threatening message that don't you dare to do this. Now, don't you think that this is digital defamation? Now, when a defamation online will become doxing, I want to ask you all, And these are the deliberations which you and me, being the researcher of particular different branches of criminal law and criminology, has to understand. That, let's say, a women has been uh, put up some chats, and she has been threatened that, do you know who am I'm going to post your those pictures, those chats, and I'm going to uh, follow you or take care of you. That is the offense of doxing. It's like when you want to become a whistleblower, the woman wants to become a whistleblower, or she criticize anybody, then she has been threatened by somebody. Now, image based sexual abuse. What is image based sexual abuse? When I have given, I'm taking that example, I have given the consent to create or share an image with one person, does not mean that I have given the consent to have a public distribution. We have to understand. For example, I have sent the pictures to my husband. My husband shall not share those pictures publicly. I have given consent to view by him, or consent to be kept stored by him only. So, image based sexual abuse, there was a misconception that, okay, you have shared your picture, now it is my property. The answer is no, it is nobody's property. It is when a woman privately shares her photograph with her partner after, a conflict, after separation, after breakup. The partners may not, or shall not, or could not upload those to anywhere. It is wrong. That is image based sexual abuse. Now, what is extortion? There is trust, private content obtained, threat, demand for money. These are the ingredients for the coercion. How the coercion comes? I'm sure you all have heard this terminology, and it's a new normal which is coming in sextortion. Like, for example, somebody is threatening you, you pay me 20,000 rupees, otherwise, I'm going to post that picture, that content, that video, that chat of us to your parents, not publicly, okay? Is it not, again, is it not threat? It is threat. So when one, again, see, where am I focusing here is consent. Two consented adults are, being involving or being converting their one valid act into an illegal act. That is where, cybercrime has come into picture. Now, this is the psychology of sextortion, because, see, criminology also having an understanding of the mindset of criminal and victim both. So what victim is thinking, he or she is thinking fear, shame, secrecy, urgency, and psychological coercion. Why? Because, the understanding between two partners or two people may be altogether different. You must be wondering, ma'am, you have given us 4 5 examples, and these are somewhere related to two people who are related to each other. Can there be sextortion by an anonymous or completely stranger person? My answer is to you, yes. For example, somebody has constructed, created, AI image, sent it to you. You are a very social, responsible citizen of this country, and then the image says you are taking bribe. Now that is extortion. When that extortion is related to sexual or emotional, physical privacy of a person, that has converted into sextortion. Okay. Now, I'm sure India deepfake is a new branch of crime which has come. What is deepfake? Deepfake is AI generated or manipulated audio, image, or video designed appear to be authentic. The problem with the deepfake is it looks real. No common man can differentiate between the two, that whether it is deepfake or an original video. So here The situation is the person, the victim has to defend that it's not mine, I am not there, this content that was, content does not related to me. When then you have to give explanations. Why a victim shall have an explanation call? That is the problem in deep fake. So for example, a woman is there and there is an explicit video of person B, then a synthetic video appearing to show women A has been created. Women A has never been participated in that particular thing. That is situation. Now we have to understand why deepfakes are different. What are the photoshops? Everybody knows there were, in 2005 to 10, photoshops has been come, and photoshop is like, I'll be going manually and editing. There are limited editing options are very limited, huh? So now, yes, this limited manipulation editing has to be done by a human using a software or an application. Now there are AI platforms which are automatically creating, and it has a rapid production. There could be multiple variations, and then there could be mass distribution. So that is the situation in deepfake. Now what are the situation? There are very lower technical barriers, and the speed of harm is greater. So balance between these two is the situation, that how to make a balance between the two. So friends, the situation and a question for you all is, uh, if a sexually explicit image is completely fake, for example, that face is not existing, let's say an image being created, and that image is completely false, fake, I'm so sorry. There was some disturbance. So, the face does not exist. This is very common situation, because what is happening when there is an actual person existing, his or her personality rights are being violated. But when the person is not existing, now the situation is who's victim. We all know that there could be victimless offenses. We all know that there can be rights in situation when there are harm to the personality or personhood. But when there are no harms to the personhood, then where are the potential harm to the dignity, privacy, reputation, employment, relationship, psychological well-being? There are none. But the content is fake. Now in that particular situation, can you be punishing the person? For instance, I am sure you all have seen the movie OMG. Oh my god. The OMG movie says that you can file a complaint on God. Then the question has come that God does not have a body. How will you be filing the complaint? Who will be representing him? Then the question has come that, okay, people who are professing, they will be the accused. Here there was an image on Instagram. There was an account has been created where nude pictures of goddesses has been put. Now God cannot come and fight. Now what is the impact of that? There civil society comes into rescue, that okay, you cannot use that particular you cannot post that. Instagram account has been deleted also later on. That is a real time case, okay? But here I'm asking, it's not a god or goddesses, it is not a it is not a personality with whom people connect. Then in that particular situation, who will be the person who can take the responsibility to file a complaint? One thing which comes is state, because state is there, but there is no impact. There is no assessment to the impact. So this is new situation which has come in criminology. We have to understand that when the victim is not there, but crime says back to the society. Crime is always against the society, not against the victim. So in that particular situation, it is state's responsibility to take that particular case ahead and fight for the right, because even if there is no violation of the right, there may be violation of a duty. Are you understanding? Okay. There is this case scenario which I have bought it for you all. For example, a lecturer's photograph has been taken from a university website. We all know that everybody has this thing. Uh, let's say an offender creates a sexually exploited AI generated image using her face and circulate amongst the student. And I remember during COVID, when online classes were there, this was being a normal situation. Okay, now who all are the stakeholders involved? Who's the victim? Women whose picture has been taken. Who's the offender who has created? Now the situation comes, how we will be putting up responsibility on university, the students who've been victimized, because there may not be a primary victimization to the students, but there is a secondary victimization to the student who is looking at the picture and getting a shock that, oh my god, this is what, if today this is my professor, tomorrow it could be me. Then the platform upon they have shared, like for example, the goddess picture is put up on Instagram. Then Instagram has took the responsibility. Then role of the police, how the cyber department will be investigated that particular case. Next, cyber forensic expert, they have to prove that who has created, because it comes in mass circulation. Then who has created it? Who is the originator? From where it has been generated? Then lawyers, we have to prove that this has an impact to the victim and the secondary victim. Then there will be psychologists involved in it, because honestly speaking, physical assault has a degree and variation of pain, but the emotional and digital violence has a deeper psychological impression, which is very difficult to be faded. Now, what are the digital domestic violence? As I have told you, I have taken an example here. We all know that intimate partner violence is a new normal. For instance, a partner demands for password. This is a new situation. Okay, now everybody wants to keep a check on it. Okay, partner is asking, download this app, I want to know that where are you moving, where are you going, what are your location, or send me your Google live location, sorry, WhatsApp live location. you know he or she is keeps checking the messages, tracking the locations, monitor the contacts, who is this, who's that. Don't you think so? This is a situation where the person is having a situation that I am being watched, I am being followed. In cyber stalking, even if the man or the boy, the victim, is saying no. Yes, please. So the new concept, it comes as digital coercive control. As per law, as per Hindu Marriage Act, or Special Marriage Act, marriage is all about two people, and as per law, they are one personality. Okay, husband and wife has the individual, joint personality, or they are one identity. Okay, now the question comes, what if he is or she is having a situation where it is a fair, it is a, the consensual relationship is because of the only understanding that they are husband wife. This is digital domestic violence, where not even one single word abuse or assault is happening, but there is been watched, there has been keep checking, there has been keep scrolling on each other's public appearance. That is new form of situation, my friends. Now as I am from law, I will be giving you few situations where digital crimes have the implications on law. The first one is constitutional law, where Article 14, which says that there is equality amongst equals, so men and women are equal. Then Article 15, there will be no discrimination, but you can make some special laws for women. Then there is Article 19, which says that freedom of speech and expression. Anybody has freedom to speak and express himself and herself, but there has to be a reasonable restriction. Now there is a debate between Article 19 and the privacy, that if I wish to say that XYZ about the person, I have Article 19 freedom, but it shall not violate somebody's privacy. So the balance of it lies in reasonable restriction, my friend. Article 21 is the cornerstone of it, which says that there has to be an ecosystem of life, liberty, dignity, and privacy. You cannot say that one person has a liberty to do whatsoever they wish to say, that they'll do that. No, nothing doing. Answer is no, nothing doing. The key proposition in this is, this particular digital environment cannot become a constitutional vacuum, that it is equality, whatever I wish to say, that Article 19 says, Article 19 gives me freedom, I will speak. Answer is no. There has to be a balancing approach, and that balancing approach is case based, situation based, two people's understanding based. The next is, when I have given you impersonation and identity theft as another offense series, IT Act comes into picture, where these are the 6 sections which a woman can use if she been victimized. Section 66C, D, E, 7, 67, 67A and B, they are talking about identity theft, cheating by impersonation. You won't believe, now on dating apps there is cheating by impersonation, there is identity theft crisis, a boy becomes a girl or a girl becomes a boy and they're cheating. They are victimizing other people by impersonation, by creating false fake identities. That is prohibited by IT Act. Then violation of privacy. You cannot disturb, you cannot infringe, you cannot violate any person's privacy. But there are different dimensions altogether for this. We may talk about them in some other day. Now come obscene material. The complete understanding of offenses against women, one very strong branches is obscene material, pictures, images, documents, voice notes, voice maneuvers, manipulations. That has been punished by Section 67 of IT Act. Then sexually explicit material and material involving children in sexual explicit conduct is 67A and B. We have different provisions in BNS, BNSS and BSC too, my friends. Now I have a question. We have to understand fake sexual explicit profile of a woman. let's say there is a situation where a fake account has been created, but the picture of a woman is there. I'll take myself as an example. Somebody created an account with the name, let's say, Kiran, and the image of my being used. First of all, I'm not Kiran. I'm Naftika Singh Nautiyal, so you have to write my right name. Okay, chalo. Somebody has put up my right name. I have not created. Again, there is a difference between fake accounts and false accounts. What is the difference between the two? Fake is when the person is impersonating and stealing somebody's personality, or somebody's picture or somebody's name. False is when the person itself is not existing. Wrong, it is not, no, not there. That is the difference between fake and false. Now, what are the potential issues in it? The potential issues in it is impersonation, identity misuse, privacy violation, sexual harassment, obscenity, sexual explicit content, defamation, and intimidation. These are the key branches with the sexual explicit profile of a woman. Now, why women did not report? There is this challenge which we all have to understand, that why the reporting of the cases are so less than of the crime data. Because see, how will we know that how many crimes are committed? After reporting only we get to know. You won't believe so many crimes, so many acts, they did not being reported. Why? First is fear of family reaction. How family will be reacting that, oh, why you been victimized? Why you only? That's the first question. I don't know why this question, but it's always that taboo, that you must have done something wrong. That is social stigma. That if something happened with a woman, then question, the fingers are always on her only. If it is consented earlier, then question. If it is not consented, then question. Even if it is deep faked, then question. I fail to understand that what is the problem? Where is the problem? Why we are making it as a stigma for her? It is the double victimization to the women who already been victimized. Third situation comes workplace consequences. So many posh complaints have not been filed by women because of the workplace consequences. She may be, put up some other XYZ excuses and thrown out of the job, may not have given the promotion, may not have approved the leaves adequate given to her. So those consequences, she have remained silent. Then police questioning. If we'll see the rape clause of statement being recorded of the rape victim has now changed because of the atrocities committed or given or put up by police ask the question in a different manner, which is so wrongly done. Then victim blaming. We convert the complete scenario from accused centric to the victim centric, that she was a participative person, and she has an equal responsibility. Further circulation, there are extortions, there are fears for further circulations of different kinds of images, videos, and that social stigma of further circulation is there. Another one is distrust of authorities. A woman could not trust, because that was the outcome of the trust. So she has the distrust in the system, so that is why she did not report. And lack of awareness is, see, it starts from the family reaction, it ends to the lack of awareness, because she's also not aware that she is being victimized. She can take protection of law. She cannot be blamed, she should not be blamed. So that those are the situation from this thing. Secondary victimization, as I have used it. What is the primary harm? It is a digital abuse of the offender. What is the secondary harm which comes from the society? Why did you send? First question. Why did you trust him? Second question. Why did you put it online? You know, why these questions? They are the secondary victimization. When I'm saying why did you put in online, I'm talking about the deepfakes, because the person been misusing his or especially her picture from social media, from her handles. Why? Better question should be, why did somebody misuse it? It's like the same, my friends. I wish to give you example of stealing. If somebody's property is unguarded, not under lock, do you have a right to steal it? Do you have a right to use it? Do you have a right to misuse it? Do you have a right to manipulate it? My answer is no. The same response to the digital abuse. When it does not belongs to you, it is not yours. You shall not abuse it. Then we have to talk about digital justice, my friends, where these many stakeholders have to come together. See, the solution does not lie in law. The solution does not lie in cybersecurity, digital forensics, AI, police psychology, gender studies, policies, technology platform. The solution lies in everything. They have to come together and develop a ecosystem where technology facilitated violence against women can be solved out. Otherwise, you and me will be victimized. I am so sorry. I'm not talking about my male, colleagues, participants here, because it's not like that they're not being abused digitally. There are situations, there are instances, but the larger perspective, because the today's topic is dedicated to women, so that's why I have talked about this. Now, what are the questions we all have to ask, and we all really have to ask? The first one is, should creation of a sexual deepfake itself be a separate offense? Who should be liable? The creator, distributor, or the platform? Very interesting question. Fix up the criminal liability to whom you wish to make liable. Then, should consent be required before using someone's face for AI generation? Let's see, you are taking a public picture. You went to somewhere to roam around, you took a public picture, posted. There were people around. You did not took the consent, from them to post that picture online. But that is yet normal. I'm telling you, that will come where you have to crop, edit, blur the pictures of everybody who is in the public. Then, who should quote, or how should court authenticate AI generated evidences? Can AI reliably detect AI? Because balance is in them only. How should cross-border offenders be prosecuted? We know that cyber does not have a jurisdiction. So how we can punish them? How we can prosecute them? For example, that crime is crime in India, but that act is not crime in their own country. That has to be, international political leaders have to sit together and talk about it. How should expression be balanced between dignity and privacy? uh, After the debate which has started by Justice Putuswamy judgment in 2016 to 18, you know yet I'm also finding answers. If you'll get to know, please send it to me, that how to make a balance between dignity and privacy, because you know uh, you cannot measure it. Defamation is one of the very debatable offense where you cannot measure somebody's dignity, somebody's reputation. how much private and how much public that person is. Can a public figure picture be used anywhere? You look at Salman Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, everywhere their image is being used on their posters or their hoardings and banners. Did you took permission from them to use their picture? Just because they're public figures, their picture's been used until they are not having a personality rights. The that there. So friends, we all have to find the answers of these questions, because the solution lies in these questions only. So with this, we all have to look from victim protection to digital justice. We have to have these, 6 ecosystem where prevention, protection, detection, investigation, prosecution, and rehabilitation has to work in hand. This is my final reflection, and I'll take some questions if Edmund will permit me. If technology can create a crime in seconds, can justice respond equally faster? My answer is no, it does not. The challenge is not simply to make women safer online. It is also to secure different kind of technologies where empowerment would be given to, them from coercion, humiliation, and violence. Digital justice should be faster. Forensics has to be involved. Gender responsiveness should be there, and it has to be victim centered. There shall not be double, secondary, tertiary victimization. With this, I wish to thank each one of you. Again, I want to apologize for my delay. I am so sorry. I wish to open the floor for any questions. Thank you so very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Navtika, for the insightful and thought-provoking lecture. On behalf of Indian Society of Criminology, I sincerely thank you for sharing your time and valuable perspectives with us today. The reflections on how emerging AI technology is being used as tool to commit crimes against women in cyberspace thought-provoking, because we are all having uh, a digital platform, all of us, and it is very important for us to know of this, to know about digital justice, and it is not one singular uh, responsibility, it's the responsibility of society as a whole. Thank you for that, ma'am. We will now open the floor for a brief interaction. Participants are kindly requested to post their questions in the chat box. We'll try to take in as many questions as time permits.
Thank you so much. So, yeah, Julie, I think there are no questions, so we can call it a day.
Um, I'll just ask for a last call of questions. If you have any questions, you can just post in the chat box, since Dr. Navtika is willing to answer to all questions. Yeah. If there's no questions, you can proceed. We will wait for a couple minutes, ma'am.
Sure.
Hello, ma'am. Can I ask one question?
Uh, please, Mr. Dixit.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, the many cases related to the deepfake, and we saw related the face swapping techniques. So in this live demo, if we are showing some demo, so is related to some laws for the deepfake or face swapping. I'm basically trainer for the cyber security. So we show the live demos in audience to how to face swap and how to deepfake. So is there law for it if someone misuse it?
Yes, Mr. Dixit, I have mentioned section 66 and 67 of IT Act. If there is an identity theft and impersonation, we have to see that if somebody's body and somebody's face, it is impersonation, or it can be identity theft also. Okay, if they both are there related to a crime, like for example circulation, if I'm creating, or for academic purpose, as you have mentioned that you are
As a trainer, yeah.
yeah, you are using for in trainings, then it is completely fine, because there is no harm, you are teaching a technology. But
Yes.
when there is circulation and there is violation of somebody's right, then it is a problem.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay, I got a question in chat box. I'll read it. In case of digital coercive control, how to decide whether consent was free and fair, especially when it is between romantic partners? So, Ms. Chaudhary, it's a right question. See, as this is a continuous crime, the moment see, there is always an objectivity of sharing. Let me just put it in a way. If I'm sharing my picture, for example, my or video is on, you are taking a screenshot and putting up on your LinkedIn, it is fine. I have not denied it, but I have not permitted it. It is an implied consent. When I expressly said that you shall not use it, or you shall not take a screenshot of it, that is express denial. That means I have denied my consent that you cannot use my picture. When I am sending my photo to you, my express and implied consent is for you to watch or you to see. I have never given the consent to further circulate it. The further circulation is a challenge. Are you getting it? If I want to post it on a social media, I'll put on my Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram. So we have to understand that the free consent is there for the individual person or group of persons, but could not be for the public use, or see, everything comes with the outcome of it. How you are putting up, for example, it's my birthday and you are putting very bad picture of mine on my social media handle. This is a very new normal, and tagging me and saying happy birthday ma'am. I may not like that picture, however it's right. I cannot say that it's wrong. But when I'm saying delete the picture, I don't allow you to do it, that means I'm expressly denying it you to do that. Are you understanding? So implied and expressed, we have to exclusively make a difference in it. I got another question. Do you think the existing laws with some amendments would be enough? No, not at all. Even DPDP rules have not been able to create it. You won't believe, we need strict and stringent laws. But the problem is AI is dynamic in nature. It is developing. It is uh, changing. So we'll be making laws, and then something other will come. So there has to be hand in hand change, amendments. That is my response to you. Yeah, Jolie, I think there are no more questions. Over to you. Thank you. Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions and for your patient listening. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you, ma'am. See, there seems to be no questions, but I do have one question, if I may. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. So, you mentioned like during the secondary victimization, there are so many questions asked to the victims, like, why did you trust this person? Why did you put your pictures? But isn't the point of relationship, it is built on trust, and you cannot blame the person for trusting a romantic partner or maybe a friend or whoever it is. So, shouldn't the question be redirect as, why did someone who was trusted with this much information do it?
Usually your question is the a very relevant one. I cannot say that most relevant one, but the very important and interesting one. See, when there is trust, everything is fair and right. But when there is a broken trust and there is drift and drifts, You find everything looks wrong, everything looks ugly, but the situation is other way around. uh, what is the relationship between two people, only two people knows. So mentioning that why you do that at the situation may be an implied consent, but after the difficulty between the two people, there has to be an expression that now, I don't allow you, or I wish you to delete, my photos or pictures. I remember there was a web series like this where there was an application being made where the person has been deleted from the online presence. Let's say your and my picture are together, and I am not no longer in talking terms with you, and I'm using that AI application and saying delete my all the pictures with Yazoli, and that application is deleting all the pictures, everything which we were sharing together. That will come, in real time. It may be a fiction, but it will come for sure, and that will be maybe the answers to your question.
Yes, thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you so
With
much.
no questions, we will be wrapping up the Q&A session. There seems to be no questions, so we will move on to the conclusion. So, as we conclude today's session of the Crime, Justice and Society Dialogue, I would like to formally praise and record our heartfelt thanks to our speaker, Dr. Navtika Singh Nautia, for delivering such an enriching lecture. I would also like to extend my sincere gratitude to the leadership and office bearers of the Indian Society of Criminology for their constant encouragement and support in making this lecture series possible. My thanks also goes to all participants whose presence and active engagement have made the session vibrant and purposeful. We are delighted to share the upcoming volumes of the series featuring distinguished scholars from across institutions. Volume 11 will be delivered by Dr. Usman Suleiman Sarki, Professor, Federal University, Dutch, Nigeria. Volume 12 by Dr. Akshat Mehta, Professor, National Forensic Science University, and Volume 13 by Dr. Danwan Oom, Professor, Utrecht University, the Netherlands. We look forward to your continuous participation in these forthcoming dialogues, with promises to broaden perspectives and deepen critical engagement with contemporary chronological issues. I kindly request all of you to regularly visit the ISC website and follow our official social media handles for announcements, registration details, and updates regarding future sessions. Once again, thank you all for being part of this volume. We look forward to seeing you in the next volume of Crime, Justice, and Society Dialogue. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am. Hello.